I would sell candy out of my backpack at school.
Yeah.
My mom would take me to Smart and Final, and I would buy like Now and Laters and Good and Plenty and basically stick them in my backpack and then mark them up and sell them to kids in class.
I remember too, there was one point, similar story in the high school, the hall monitors and stuff. They thought I was selling drugs because all these kids were coming to my lockers and I had mixtapes in there. They're like, what do you got? And I was like, I've never done a drug in my life still. So like,
Benztown president Dave Chachi Dennis loves radio and all of his radio friends.
Hey, Chachi.
Hey, everybody.
Because Chachi loves everybody.
Our next guest is the founder of Dash Radio, the biggest all-original live digital audio network, and Skee Sports, an award-winning sports content and game day entertainment agency working across the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, and more. He's also won a myriad of awards. Billboard Magazine and Forbes both named him influential power player, 30 under 30, which is incredibly impressive. And he's known to be a trendsetter, first to interview major superstars like Lady Gaga, Justin Bieber, Post Malone, Kendrick Lamar, and many others. Welcome, DJ Skee. Hi, DJ Skee.
what's up, Chachi? How are you?
I'm good, man. Really appreciate you joining me. I see that you are relatively brand new digs that you guys just built out, maybe 6 months ago in Hollywood?
We opened the month before COVID shut us down. So timing was not on our side. Usually we're a little luckier, but it's all good.
I was fortunate enough to see Skee about a month ago, and he gave me a tour, and this facility is amazing. First of all, it's gigantic. How big is it?
We're like 25,000 square feet right in the heart of Hollywood on the Walk of Fame. We're excited. I'm glad you got to see it.
What an amazing location. And he's got a studio literally right out on the street. So people that are walking on the sidewalk can actually look in and see people recording a show, and just an incredible space, multiple levels. He's got all sorts of different things we're going to go into a little bit more details about. But to give you an idea of how large this is, it used to be a small department store, correct?
Yeah, it was a department store back in the day, and it was vacant for a long time, and happened to know the owner, and we just worked out something that ended up coming perfect. And we realized all the cool things that we could do. We really created it as almost a fantasy factory for content. And we tried to create the coolest experiences for talent and for fans that we think, we can create the best content from. So that's why we built the storefront studio on the most famous street in the world that, arguably is the only place that any tourist that comes to Hollywood that wants to see a celebrity, at any time they can walk by our studio and see that and experience that. We have the retail pop-up space, a gaming lounge that we're building, full event venue. We even built a crazy art installation basketball court, multiple studios, a sound stage, and then our offices. It's a really, really fun location.
It's spectacular. And as you were giving me the tour, I was so blown away at the design elements. And I thought that you guys hired someone professional. And I asked who did this, thinking it's out of Architectural Digest.
Oh, man.
And you told me that you're the one who did it. And I'm just blown away at what a great eye you have.
Our team, man, we're still a startup at the end of the day, right? So we have to be efficient with our costs. And a lot of these design firms are great, but they cost a lot of money. So luckily, we have a lot of creative minds with it, and I can't take full credit. A lot of it comes down to J Love, who really, kind of spearheaded the project. We all kind of came in with our own eyes and visions, and our whole team really executed. And we worked with a great group of people, and we're able to pull off something, especially for as big of a space as we had and as much work as it needed, being a vintage department store that was vacant since 2000. There's quite a significant amount of upgrades and little hidden things that, as we all know, when you do construction, always pop up. And we were able to plow through it and really make it something special while keeping that same kind of integrity and vibe, the old Hollywood vibe that it had originally.
Well, I can attest you're not only an audio tastemaker, but you're absolutely a visual tastemaker as well. Very impressive facility.
Thank you. We try. We're excited.
So tell me a little bit about you growing up in Minneapolis.
Yeah, man. So growing up, I thought I was going to be a pro athlete. That was my first love was really baseball, basketball, sports, football. And I thought that's what I was going to do until, all of a sudden as a teenager, I got my hands on Behind the Turntables, and I just instantly knew that was my calling. And stopped focusing on sports and anything else and just went all in. Not from like a necessarily like overly cocky perspective, but just from more matter of fact, like, no, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to find a way to make this happen. So growing up in Minneapolis in St. Paul was great. It was, an incredible setup that's given me my foundation. I think those Midwest roots were super important, and it's helped really build the character of who I am today. And it still feels so great to go back home. And I'm so lucky to still work with, ironically enough, all the sports teams locally, which bring me back now. But once I got into music, and then I took an audio engineering class in high school, I was just focused on that. You couldn't tell me anything else.
Was there a DJ or a musician or someone that just really resonated with you that got you into music?
There was a few. I mean, I loved all genres of music growing up. So, even my mom listened to country. My dad is an incredible jazz musician. I listened to hip hop and rock growing up pretty much equally. And so was able to kind of walk and experience all of those worlds. I remember my mom was, before I was born, but I'd always hear the tapes and the stories. She was on radio. She did a morning show in West Lafayette, Indiana, at Purdue on the local, college station. So she was the morning personality there. My grandmother, in fact, was one of the first women on radio. She was in Pensacola, Florida, and that's how she met my grandfather. He heard her voice on the radio, and he was like, he fell in love with her from her voice without seeing her back in the old days. Yeah, so radio really was in my blood, and luckily back in Minnesota, I had some great people. There was the first shop that sold my mixtapes was a place called Urban Lights in St. Paul, and Tim, the owner, connected me with a DJ who was doing one of the night shifts at KMOJ, the local community station out there. And, it was DJ Anna who gave me a shot and put me on it. It was still like 4 a.m. on a Saturday night on a small community station in the hood in North Minneapolis. At the time, Minneapolis had the highest murder rate in the world, but
oh my God,
not in the world, in the country. But it was, quite an experience, and I just fell in love with it. And, those were some of the funnest times in radio too, like doing those first shifts when nobody's listening, even over some of the more, the biggest things that I've been able to and gone on to do. So it was a great foundation. But as you said, it was it wasn't just myself. It was a group of people that really helped and supported me along the way.
So both your mother and your grandmother are on-air talent. And then your father, you said, is a jazz musician?
Yeah, he still plays piano nonstop. He's one of the best pianists you'll see.
That's incredible. Does he tour?
He doesn't tour. He just does it for fun. He's always done it for the love. And, he's a college professor, and since has gone on to create his own practice and do some really incredible things around, there's not even right words to describe it, but he's had quite a life and an experience. And music's kind of been in the foundation of a lot of his work. He's found as he's traveled across the world and, created or documented some of the oldest living tribes and cultures in there. And, so he's really preached to me the foundation and the importance of music and rhythm and beats. And I think that's why, coming a DJ for me was so natural.
Yeah, that's fantastic to have that kind of upbringing. So I asked the question, were your parents supportive? Because so many times parents aren't supportive of their children going into radio, but I'm guessing yours were.
They were. They let me, my story's a little crazy because my first real major break was getting offered a job by Steve Rifkin when I was 17 years old to move to Los Angeles and work for him. And a lot of people wouldn't have been supportive of, still being in high school, not even being of legal age, and, moving across the country to a place that I had no familiarity with. And they thought, it might have been crazy. They also understood the importance of life experiences and were always encouraging and supportive of that. And, obviously it was the best move that I ever made in hindsight. And we looked at it like, look, if the worst that could happen is I have to come back and be back in the same position where I am. It didn't work out. It's, no harm, no foul. I was still young enough to get away with it.
That's a great outlook. So how old were you when you moved from St. Paul, Minneapolis to LA?
I was 17 when I got the job and came out here. It was crazy. Yeah.
That's fantastic, man. So you went literally within like a year of being on KOMJ to getting an opportunity to come to LA.
Totally. I as soon as I started, I took my engineering class and I was 15, 16, started DJing really when I was 16 and ended up on radio when I was 16. And it was doing I really started off on the mixtape side. So I was doing a lot of mixtapes and started off selling them in my schools. I remember burning, CDs at the time and just having a CD burning ring, staying up all night because it was fastest you could burn was individual for the system that I had was like individually, and you could burn at 2x the speed. So and it was like 70-minute projects. So it'd take 40 minutes to do one CD. So I'd stay up all night burning them. And, I really just busted my butt and put in as much work as I could, networked, and started selling my stuff in other stores across the country, set up a website, made it look like I was, this big DJ and stuff from, and I was very early on the internet. And I think that's why Steve Rifkin offered me that job, is because he realized the power that was coming and didn't quite understand it. So we wanted somebody that was like a kid in that generation that really understood it. And yeah, luckily it all kind of came together.
So you are obviously an incredible talent, television host, on-air talent, but you are also an amazing entrepreneur. You really are kind of two sides. And there's only a handful of people that are really like that. You look at a Dick Clark, of course, or a Ryan Seacrest, Casey Kasem did it, but you really ride both sides, which I have so much respect for. Where did the entrepreneurial spirit come from?
I appreciate that. That means a lot coming from an entrepreneur like yourself and a personality like yourself too, Chachi, seriously. So what you guys have done is phenomenal with Benztown. It's, especially, I personally, this isn't like an advertisement for you, but I love using the tools and everything. So it's great watching what you guys have built in this industry too.
Very kind to you, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah. But for me, it's been interesting, all of those, the business side always kind of came naturally for me. It was never something like, obviously I did not go to school for it. I was kind of learned by fire. But if you take back a look at my history, back even when I was in high school, I was selling, mixtapes. I was never working a true 9 to 5. The way I really made money, like around the holidays, was when PS2 and Xbox first came out. Was, all my friends would work at Target or Best Buy, and I'd slide them $20 to tell me when the next shipment was coming in and go buy them and sell them for double the money on eBay. And that's actually how I met Steve Rifkin. And, I moved on from that, from like selling sneakers and all these just different hustles to make a living. I ended up probably working for less than minimum wage if you count like all the hours that I put it in, like burning CDs and doing that. But I just realized like that entrepreneur spirit was always kind of just came natural for me. And, I was lucky because I was able to get a business foundation when I moved to LA first. I was always a DJ, but I didn't really make it as a DJ until a little bit later on. So I worked on the industry side of things when I came out here, and was able to utilize all that knowledge and kind of foundation as I grew my artist career and background, and later on kind of really put all of those together. So it was a combination of just like, for me, business has always just kind of come, and entrepreneurship was kind of natural, even without being taught that. Like both of my parents were self-admittedly not, business people at all. Like they're both educators and creatives and are not in that world at all. So there wasn't really anybody that taught me that side of things. It was that they taught me the creativity and they gave me the passion and the belief to go pursue my dreams. So the entrepreneurial side just came always kind of naturally to me.
It's interesting when you said you were selling your mix CDs out of your backpack. Not a DJ, but I would sell candy out of my backpack at school. Yeah. My mom would take me to Smart and Final, and I would buy like Now and Laters and Good and Plenty and basically stick them in my backpack and then mark them up and sell them to kids in class. And I ended up getting in trouble for it, but my parents were always like so supportive. And I remember saving enough money to buy a skateboard, and they took me down to the skateboard shop, and it was like such a cool, exciting thing. And you just felt so great about yourself.
I remember too, there was one point, similar story in the high school, the hall monitors and stuff. They thought I was selling drugs because all these kids were coming to my lockers, and I had mixtapes in there. They're like, what do you got? And I was like, I've never done a drug in my life still.
So now you're on Power in LA. You're 17, 18 years old.
I was older in Power. So when I came out here, I was working in the industry side. So I wasn't on radio when I first moved to Los Angeles. I was still DJing and moonlighting as a DJ, right? And doing it for fun and waiting for my big break. I started the first, real radio gig I had out here was actually on Sirius before it was even Sirius XM, when it was just Sirius. And they happened to be looking for, since they were based in New York, they were looking for a West Coast DJ on one of their hip hop stations. And through being in the industry, I saw the invite and reached out to them and started off just sending mixes and worked my way up to ultimately doing, a weekly show from that. And it was kind of during that time, my career really took off as a DJ when I produced like 300 bars with Game, and was like thrown into the middle of the Game, 50 Cent Beef, and kind of, jumped in that on the mixtape side. And then from that, on the terrestrial side, the first station that I went to was Power 106 out here.
Man, that's amazing. So you're on Sirius, which really your first after then KOMJ. You get a nationwide satellite show that's across the entire country. Yeah, but
nobody was listening to Sirius at that time too. Like I thought it was so cool. And I was always a big believer because I was like, this is going to be the future. And I saw what it would become now, right? Like, but I realized that like, look, it was like they had to wait for people to turn over and buy new vehicles. So like Sirius, while it is impressive and it sounds great now, back then, we had no listeners.
Power was certainly impressive. How did that position come to be?
Yeah, Power was great. So I connected with my guy Reflex, and he saw what I was doing in the streets, and I was friends with a lot of the DJs and stuff, just kind of being in the scene. And at the time, Game was the hottest West Coast hip hop artist without question, really on this run, and I was the guy kind of powering it. And I'd always wanted to do, kind of like a new music show. The first DJ that really helped teach me radio back in the day, and that just let me hang around with Stretch Armstrong. So I kind of emulated what his career was in breaking artists and new music, and he let me hang around when he was doing like his Hot 97 show back in the day. So I kind of wanted to do the same thing in West Coast radio because I realized there wasn't an opportunity, and we were creating these incredible with what Game was doing, and a lot of new artists, like a guy named K-Dot who went on to change his name and become Kendrick Lamar, obviously like Snoop being a West Coast legend, like the mixtape scene was really popping off. And while New York radio embraced that, LA radio hadn't embraced that. There wasn't really the opportunity or place for that. So we launched a show, Reflex and myself, on Power that was all dedicated towards new music. And that's still where so many of these artists got their first airplay and interviews out here on terrestrial radio.
I have so much respect, and time again on this podcast, Rick Cummings, Jeff Smulyan, the team at Emmis comes up. And if you look at the talent that they've helped promote or discover, Mike Francesa, Big Boy, Skee, Woody Show, it's unbelievable the amount of talent that has started or gotten an early beginning at their company. Just surreal.
Yeah, it was great. And for me, like that was the dopest stuff. Like I remember one of my first experiences moving to LA, I was in a U-Haul and turning on Power 106 and just hearing, because in Minneapolis at the time, there wasn't a hip hop station. So it was so refreshing. And to hear like all the mixers, like the mixers have always been world-class at Power, right? So like I remember driving down, the grapevine and like listening to Power and hearing those mixes. So to get on that station was awesome. Just a great feel.
And also much credit, I shouldn't have left out Jimmy Steele, but just another.
Yeah, shout to Jimmy.
Maverick in the industry. So. Yeah. So from Power, you then cross the street, literally, because Power is right across the street from Kiss.
It's so funny, right?
So did John Ivey come knocking on your door?
Yeah, it was. I met with Julie and John at the time, and for me, I'd been expanding my brand, right? Like I'd always, if you look at my foundation, it was kind of every genre of music. Although hip hop was definitely kind of the centerpiece of that, and what set my career path up, and what I got known for. I didn't want to be just isolated as being, on one thing being games DJ, and the other hand just being like a mixtape DJ, and the other hand just being a hip hop DJ. So at that point, I'd started to like DJ a lot of the clubs in Vegas early on. I remember I'd opened up Excess and the opening night of Excess, which is one of the biggest clubs ever in Vegas, and still up and running strong, and had the first residency there. And I think for a time was like the highest. I think it was the highest paid DJ there before like this is before like Calvin Harris and all the EDM guys came in and just shot the rates through the roof. So it was not a ton of money for that, but it felt good at the time.
If you've not been in that club, it's unbelievable. I think the number was like a $30 million build out of that club. Am I correct in that figure?
It was more, bro. I think it was closer to 9 figures for that.
Are you
like
kidding
they
me?
spent so much money on it, and it shows. But I remember the first night I was DJing, the opening, like the official opening night. It was New Year's Eve, 2009-ish, somewhere around then. It was the New Year's party, and the amount of money that they made that night alone was, I was like, you guys will pay back the club in 2 months. Like all the costs, like they made so, those clubs, and especially at the height of that, it's going to be interesting to see as a side note if that comes back post COVID, but they were raking in money, but they spent a lot on it. So it was great. But yeah, for me, I wanted to expand and not just be isolated in hip hop, and kind of reflect that. And Kiss gave me an incredible opportunity and let me come in and help program the new music. We launched a similar new music show that was once a week by myself, where I would, we were the first to play on air Justin Bieber, Gaga, have all these people on. I was helping program the HD2 news station. And at the time I had launched an online business called Skee TV that was basically an early vlog. I saw what YouTube was doing and realized there was going to be this massive opportunity in content. Didn't know how it would look, but I was like, let's just start piecing together shows. And I figured being a DJ, I was in the perfect position because I'm with all these artists all the time. So there's no shortage of content that I'm creating. And we also came in and helped and were hired, in the Skee TV side to help run the Kiss FM socials and create content for them. So we did a lot of cool things there.
So at this time, you're probably kind of wrestling because you've got so many skill sets, DJ, on-air talent, entrepreneur. Was one interesting you more than the other, or were you just kind of embracing it all?
It was kind of embracing both, right? Like there's been moments where like when I moved out here, I had to start off on the entrepreneurial side. I started off obviously as a DJ. And then my DJ side took over. So I focused on that. Then I jumped back to entrepreneurial. So it's kind of been a bounce back, but I find when I have the most successes is when I'm kind of equally focused on both because they both really help each other. And also too, for me, I love all the variety, and yet at the same time too, as much as I love music, there's a moment where like, look, when I was in my 20s and young, it was awesome being in Vegas every night and DJing and flying out every weekend and having the residencies there. But I don't think I'd want to do that now. I enjoy it and still have those moments, but I wouldn't want to make a full-time living off that. Same way on the business side, right? Like the business side is great, but you don't have the same energy that you feel like with the crowd and with those people and being a creative. I really enjoy both sides of it kind of equally. And I try to balance it out.
Have you seen some of your friends like Avicii and I know Calvin Harris has written about this, that lifestyle kind of unfortunately destroy them or hurt them?
Man, I've known so many DJs and still know so many DJs that are on the road almost every day and making more money than they'll be able to spend it even in their lifetime. And it doesn't bring happiness. And I've been lucky enough to experience early on moments where I've had a little bit of money and moments when I haven't had money. And I had a great foundation where, everybody says, money isn't everything. It doesn't make you happy. And that's true. There's been moments when I've been really successful financially, but haven't been happy, and moments when I haven't been very successful financially, but been extremely happy. And so for me, I've always tried to find that balance of like, of course you need to make money and it's a good goal to shoot for, but it's not the only thing. If I just wanted to make money, I would have, become an investment banker or something, but that's just not of interest to me. I'd rather, as long as you're making the baseline that you need to survive, then the rest is just kind of icing on the cake. And for me, it's about having fun because the time is more valuable than any money. And I've really learned that. And I'd rather be making less, doing stuff that I love versus, and creating stuff and having that freedom versus, maximizing every penny, but being in that rat race. And it's a tough challenge, right? Like I have to remind myself and jump off the end and not get too far in on one side of that.
I was listening to Dax Shepard interviewing Jon Bon Jovi a few weeks ago, and I didn't know this, but Jon Bon Jovi, outside of marijuana, has not taken any other drugs. And I heard you very early on in this interview saying that you haven't as well, correct? Did I hear that?
Never even marijuana.
Not even how?
Not even weed, even though it's legal. It's not even a drug anymore. It's not an illegal drug.
It's true. So. It is. You're right. You're absolutely right. How did you stay clear of that? The temptation just, had to be extreme in these crazy clubs, I'm sure, fans throwing themselves at you and it all being at your fingertips.
For me, it's interesting. Everybody says that, but it was never really like, I never felt tempted like, damn, I really want to do this or try that. Growing up, my mother was an alcoholic. And so I got to see kind of the negative side effects of that. And, I look at it as a blessing in disguise because it made me realize and see kind of the pain and the devastation that could cause. And it almost like scared straight, right? Like it kept me scared straight and kept me so far away from that. I never really had the desire to do that. And my brain is already running and I already feel like crazy enough all the time. I can't imagine what like an illegal substance would be on those things. And luckily I've always been very disciplined. So I actually haven't had those temptations. A lot of people speak about them, but maybe because I've never experienced that. So it's not been something. And, because I kind of grew up the way that I did, I was able to kind of steer a different path.
That's amazing, man. My hat's off to you because that takes a tremendous amount of willpower and discipline. So you're back at KISS and you're working with two legends, John Ivey, obviously, and then Julie as well, who's now at Apple. Where does this taste making come into play? Was this something maybe because your father was a musician and he had an ear, but the artists that you go on to really are instrumental in discovering them and launching their career is a who's who: Lady Gaga, Bieber, Post Malone, Kendrick Lamar. How do you know that these are hits and that these people are talented before most of the world does?
That's a great question. If I knew that like with 100% accuracy, I would assign every artist myself and be the most successful, record label person in the history of the world. The truth is, it's a combination of things. From my personal foundation, if you look at kind of what I've done really well and my kind of unique skill set that I would say is above average, is really identifying trends early, whether that's on the business side, whether that's on the music side, whether that's in just content and things in general. I've always been super early with things, and music has been one of those foundations. Being a mixtape DJ, it was all about breaking new music. That's what mixtapes were when I grew up. Being on the radio and the radio positions that I had, they weren't just typical on-air positions generally. There was opportunities to break music. And based on the successes that I'd had with Skee TV, across radio, breaking artists, and introducing a lot of these people early on, and being an advocate when I really found something that I liked. And there's been many times when I've really believed in something that just hasn't taken off as well. So I'm not batting 1,000 by any stretch of the imagination. But I was always out there, and I've always been intrigued by what's next and giving people opportunities and helping shine a light to help them. And as you do that, more things happen. And the great situation that they gave me at KISS enabled me to have the freedom and the creative ability to play what I wanted. We were doing a music show on Sundays, so it wasn't forced to play a more strict playlist. We were able to go out and take experiments and risks on artists like Lady Gaga, like I remember Scooter called me and he's like, I want to bring Justin by. And I thought at the time too, I didn't realize it was real because I'd known Scooter for a long time. It's funny. I thought he was faking all the Justin stuff. I'm like, Scooter, you don't have to have these girls show up outside. I'll play the record. Like, you're a homie. I believe in the kid anyways. I was the first person you called, I think, when you found him that night. And he's like, no, this is real. And I actually didn't believe it at the time. But like, that was always like, for me, was always putting people on. And that was kind of my experience. And then being in positions where I was enabled and allowed to do that, I think was incredible. And it really helped everybody, right? It helped the artist, helped myself, it helped, our station's brand.
So you're doing amazingly well. You're at arguably the most influential CHR in the country. You're helping programming. You're working with two legends in the business. You've on air. You're DJing at amazing nightclubs around the world. And you take this gigantic leap and you're like, I'm going to walk from that and I'm going to start Dash, which I think takes so much guts. And I honestly don't think I would have done that if I were you. Where did that come from? What made you decide to do it?
Great question. And, a lot of people thought I was crazy, or still might think I was crazy for that. I was in an incredible position for that. I mean, like, look, there's a few things that if you look at, for me, again, if you look at my skill set, I've always tried to forecast or identify trends early on. Not that I'm a trend maker, but I'm really great at identifying things that are bubbling. And it was just inevitable. And I think that it was going to be obvious looking back on time that terrestrial radio was shifting and was changing. And we'd seen what happened in the music straight business side, not on the radio side, but in the business side, and what Spotify had done to MP3s, which had done that to CDs, which had replaced, tapes and vinyl, so on and so forth. And when we looked at radio, we realized that, the platform there, it hadn't evolved fully into a digital base. And we thought that the solution the legacy broadcasters, like the iHearts of the world, had was less than optimal. And I remember like sitting with John and even Bob and some of those guys and sending them ideas on what was, going on. And I gave kudos to them for launching iHeart, because at the time people didn't even understand that. I was like, well, you guys realize this is going digital and something that you need to do. So congratulations. But I didn't think the strategy that they employed, and it's tough for them to change it, right? Because of the business models that they have today of, syndicating the 56 KISS FMs that they have into one app. There's no incentive for somebody in LA to listen to KISS FM in, Boston or some other station, especially if you're using premium choice and bringing on those same personalities. What you end up with in the digital radio realm was just straight analog ports. People hadn't built specific digital only products that were optimized for digital environments and digital audiences. So instead of having 10,000 stations, which I think, radio works because you have a very finite amount You hop in your dashboard of your car, you have your preset stations, and you go between those. It's enough options, but not too many. I thought that, there was an opportunity for somebody to build from the ground up and not be burdened by legacy infrastructure, an all original like digital radio broadcast network. And for us, it was much more than just radio. It's building a whole content brand and a lifestyle brand that could mean, we wanted to build something that had the impact MTV had when I was growing up, in terms of, that's why we have the storefront studios, and you'll see a lot of those things. But radio was the first product we wanted to launch to get in there, because audio content's significantly cheaper to make than video. And that's where we saw the biggest opportunity to grow. So it was an idea I'd had for a while, especially like being in
a while. You were like 23. So how long could you
No, I wish I was a little older. But being there and watching iHeart launch and helping and doing those things, and saw it, like, I was like, man, there's going to be something else that comes along and that exists in the same ecosystem. And, and being at Sirius too, I was like, well, like, these things are great, but I think, $17 a month for a radio subscription when Spotify is $9.99. And just looking at what the age demos were trending, I was like, somebody's going to come in and do this. And it got to the point where I didn't want to be the guy with an idea that's like, wakes up one day and sees somebody else execute it, and like, oh, they just sold this company for $1 billion, and be like, I had that idea first, and not execute on it. And at the time too, I was starting to get burned out. I mean, I was doing 6 days a week on Sirius XM, programming the new music on KISS, doing the new music show there, on top of doing the TV show and doing other things. And I'd lost a lot of the passion and excitement that I'd had for radio at that point, just from being at that. It just wasn't progressive, and there wasn't enough opportunity moving forward. And also, like, looking at KISS, like, there wasn't much more that I could do. They had a great roster. I mean, like, what am I going to do? Replace Ryan Seacrest? And Ryan, it's not going to happen anytime soon, right? Like, Ryan's going to go on for another, 20, 30, 40 years. Who knows, right? So, like, I'm not going to wait for forever. And by the time he's done, is radio going to exist in an AM? Is AM FM even going to be around at that time? I don't know. So I was like, look, we got to sometimes jump off the ledge. And we launched Dash with the goal of becoming like a definitive music brand, but focus really on radio as our first product. And we launched with a bunch of stations and wanted to create an environment where talent creatives could really be themselves and do whatever they want, as opposed to terrestrial radio stations. And when you look at, just the cost and expenses that go into that and how much you have to make, and it's all about cume, of course you need to cast the widest net possible. So they operate the exact way that any business should, right? To monetize and maximize the value. In the digital environment, though, we're not spending these crazy amounts on spectrum and those signals. And it doesn't really cost us much to launch a new station once we have the tools and technology. So we wanted to go in and cater to Tyler, the Creator, and his whole fan base that wasn't getting played on FM radio. We wanted to partner with YG Presents on the K-pop side, who, we're seeing the massive fandom from K-pop, but there's not a platform that's playing K-pop on terrestrial radio. And we wanted to jump into all those niches and genres that work really well on the internet. And that's what we kind of launched Dash with radio being that first foundation, is creating an alternative, really targeting kids in a different demographic than, didn't listen to AM, FM radio. And these were kids that weren't really listening to radio at that point already.
And now that you vocalize all that to me, I honestly never completely understood it, but the long tail makes so much sense now. I never really completely got that, but I absolutely get it now. And it's brilliant. And to have those thoughts at your age, again, maybe mid 20s, where did you go? So you've got this unbelievable vision that you just explained to us. Who did you go to pitch to help make it a reality? Because to build something like you've built isn't cheap.
Yeah, definitely not. And luckily, over my years in kind of the industry and doing these events, I built up just an incredible network. There's a good friend I made by the name of Matt Mickelson, who was deep in the Silicon Valley scene, and he dibbled a little in Hollywood and kind of gotten burned, so didn't have a great experience there. But we always stayed close. And I went to him really with hey, here's what my vision is. Here's what I think the opportunity was. He kind of guided me with how to put it together. And then I started jumping in and talking with other friends that I'd made that had been extremely successful in tech and investments in that whole realm. And they helped not only guide the company, but put the first money in because they believed in me, which was an incredible feeling to have. And so they really taught me the ropes. And there's really no experience better than being on the inside and actually doing something yourself. I'm a fan of learning a little bit about a lot so I can walk between these worlds and do that. Then bring on experts, like even with accounting, right? Like I know the very basic things. So when I'm talking to my accountant or tax preparer, I know what the typical forms and how deductions and those things work, but then I hire the experts to really go execute those things. So it was very similar, right? Was able to kind of come with this idea and vision and guide and lead that, but jump in and tap into my network to tap into people that were best in the world in all those fields to help us build and ultimately launch what became Dash.
It's just absolutely remarkable. And then the talent that you collaborate with and the companies are unbelievable. You've got Snoop Dogg has a channel, Kylie Jenner, EA Sports. You've done things with the NBA. I mean, was there one company or one personality that kind of you were able to get to do a channel that all of a sudden put you on the map? Or was it just a few kind of all happen at the same time? How did that all roll out?
It was great. I mean, like I was obviously able to leverage some of my connections and rapport and relationships in the industry when we first launched to attract people like Tyler. And, we first launched with a lot of people that didn't have a regular place at regular radio. And our pitch was very easy. Like, hey, this is a platform for you to interact with your community with audio. We have the licensing. We have the distribution. We're bundling this together. I'm a big believer in bundles still, even though a lot of people went to the direction of unbundling. You're seeing bundling coming back because when you're going after distribution and auto manufacturers like GM, if we were just playing hip hop stations, it's not going to care because it's only going to appeal to a small subset. But we needed to cover every element and genre. So we went out and did that. And after we launched, the inbound interest was incredible. I remember, and I'd known Snoop and worked with him for a long time, but I didn't even pitch him on it, right? Like I wanted it to be organic and authentic, and we wanted to build this company the right way. We didn't have the most, we've raised a decent amount of money for what we've done and the amount of content that we create. It's pennies on the dollar. And we didn't go out, and we're not a big fan of believing in spending on talent and buying our way in because it's not authentic. We want to create things that people want to be in and that they can see the upside and they actually can use our products and benefit. So when we got the calls from Snoop, from Kylie's team, from these biggest artists, these are all people that really approached us and wanted to leverage this unique ecosystem that we built, this audience that we had, this distribution network, the music rights. And they trusted our creativity to pull it off. And that's what was really amazing. So I think it was when everybody started coming to us and calling us to do stations was when this really kind of flipped.
It's an absolute incredible story, man, what you've built. And you've attracted some of the biggest investors, Reid, Adrian Peterson. I mean, it's amazing who's involved in the company that you founded, and just watching it become as successful as it has been is fantastic. And from it, other things have now happened entrepreneurial. You invested in StockX. Fill everyone in a little bit on what StockX is all about.
Absolutely. So I've been big into sneakers. That was one of when I was a teenager. That's another thing I was selling: PlayStation sneakers, music, and mixtapes. And I was just always a fan before it was even cool. As the sneaker scene really started taking off, late 2000s and stuff. I started putting up some of my collection, and that's my biggest vice was buying sneakers. I still have like 2,000 pairs. It's way too many, and
still much better than drugs.
Very true, and more valuable. I'd always justify it to myself. I'm like, these are only going to go up in value, right? So I can't lose if you buy them. It's better than stocks, but
that's right. Not going to kill you.
Through being in that scene, I got to executive produce one of the definitive documentaries on sneaker culture called Sneakerheads on Netflix with David Friendly, who did Little Miss Sunshine and some other projects, and I also narrated that project. I did it's funny because more kids probably know me for my sneaker collection and the videos I've done with Complex than that know me for even music. So it's crazy how that's flipped. And I got connected one day from somebody that was working with Dan Gilbert and did a new startup with him called, didn't even have a name yet, but in essence, it was going to be a stock market of things and with sneakers. And Dan had watched his kids buying sneakers on eBay and thought that it wasn't the best process because it wasn't as transparent. There wasn't ways to look up data. You could get fakes or frauds. You were depending on independent sellers. It was still kind of like the Wild West. And he's like, why is there not a better system? So he had this idea to launch, in essence, a company that would be a third party between sellers and buyers, where you could list it, you could see market data, you could kind of accurately price things. Because before, if there's not a much of pairs, I could say, hey, this pair is worth, $100,000, and it might be worth $100 or whatever that is. So with now looking at this data, you can see the true value of things. And by serving as kind of a middleman, you're able to authenticate, to verify the legitimacy of these sneakers and provide great customer service. So he approached me and we were working with him. He was actually helping us because all the auto manufacturers in the US are, generally based in Detroit. So he'd helped us get through General Motors as we were launching with Dash and wanted to get in that car. And they've since become, we've become the #1 used app in GM. So thanks to Dan Gilbert for that layup there.
And congratulations.
But he, the reason he was interested in even working and connecting with me was because of my kind of presence on that sneaker, I hate saying like influencer side, but it was kind of, the brand I'd be built in that sneaker scene. So because of that, I threw in a little bit of money. I believed in Josh and the team that he had there and became one of the first investors before it even had a name. And luckily now StockX is valued at this is, I can say, let me think it's public. So yeah, the last valuation is over $1 billion. I mean,
oh my God, are you serious?
Yeah, sales are through the roof. I mean, it's only climbing and going from there. They have, they've just built an incredible team. It's grown so fast and so big that, it's become a unicorn. And my only regret now is not investing, everything that I had into it because the return has just been so significant. But that was a big win on the investment side.
Congratulations. It's a fantastic app. I actually bought a Kobe card a couple months ago.
Yeah, now we sell cards and everything. It started with sneakers and everything.
That's where I'm going to go to next. So that evolved back to your original love, and what you initially as a kid wanted to do was to be a professional athlete. And so sneakers leads you back into sports, but through sports cards. And walk us through what you're doing now in the sports card world.
Absolutely. So my first business is like a 10-year-old kid with sports cards, right? Like I was selling them out of my garage. So that was actually my original business. And then like many others, like I grew up, I got out of it for a while and stuff. And I actually thought the industry had died. Like I thought it was done. There was the junk wax era, which is documented if you want to read about it and learn more, just search junk wax era. And you'll kind of see what happens with overproduction and how the industry killed itself.
I was at the beginning of the junk wax era, and you were a child at the end of the junk wax era. So we kind of crossed over.
So we got to see all the signs.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is like, again, in looking at what I see, like trend spotting ability, I saw that there was this murmur coming for sports cards, and it'd been happening the past few years. So I saw that it really had a chance to come back. And really over the past year, I realized that, look, this is here. This is something big. And with what I was doing already on the sports entertainment side, on the investment side, and just what I'd kind of done in sneakers, it reminded me actually a lot of like what was happening when sneaker culture was first blowing up. And I looked in the scene and was like, well, there's not very much content out there. Like even like the retail stores that are there's nothing like modern. In sneakers, there's stores like Undefeated that are super cool and stuff. And, they took over and like became these really cool cultural meccas. There wasn't really that in the card space yet. And there also weren't a lot of companies built that utilize modern technology or digital things. So I looked at the space and was like, holy, like this is happening right now. I need to get in this. It's right on brand for what I do. It's my original, like my first business I've ever done. I'm already connected with all these teams, athletes, pro sports leagues. We have this incredible content engine, second to none with Dash. We can jump in on the content space here. Along the way, we realized, we opened up a card shop actually at our Dash headquarters between Vine and Cahuenga because we have a pop-up retail space that's not being utilized right now with COVID. So myself, another entrepreneur named Dan Fleyshman, and Steve Aoki all teamed up to launch Cards and Coffee, which is open now.
And Steve Aoki, you just kind of throw that in. And then Gary V, the entrepreneur, is also involved, correct?
Yeah. Gary's extended family there. So he has his own section here and stuff. And he's been very vocal and adamant about this for the past couple of years, even before I was on it. And so I saw there being all these opportunities. So not only was it like in buying cards and things for myself, but it was creating content, which we do really well, especially in the audio side with Dash. And that's one thing that we've teamed up to do with you guys in the Benztown side, in the sports card world. We decided there was an opportunity in the retail sector, and we had the space there. And I also just launched a new sports card and sports card industry investment fund with the Roy brothers called Mint 10. Courtney and Carter run M13, which is one of the top two, I think, venture-backed firms in LA. They were early investors in Snap and Lyft and been extremely successful. So we just launched that fund, and we also have a brand new sports card video series we're launching that I was actually just filming the first episode of this with Deshaun Watson before we jumped on, that I'm really excited about. But I haven't seen this much energy in kind of a new sector since sneakers, but it's happening a lot faster. And you're seeing a lot of the sneaker kids as that industry's kind of saturated itself and hit, it's still growing, but it's not growing with the same velocity that it did early on, just because there's so many people into it now. A lot of people are moving to cards, and it's a lot easier from and you see like other trends like daily fantasy betting, sports betting. That's what really sports cards are, right? You're betting on players, but you have a physical item, and it's not all or nothing based on one game.
You are so prolific. It absolutely blows me away with so many. We launched together a few months ago the Skee Sports Card Minute, which is in our sports library, or Benztown Sports Library. You've got Cards and Coffee, which is a fantastic shop. I got to see it a few weeks ago as well, and just some amazing cards in there. And you're also doing Case Breaking, which is really cool online. So highly recommend you check it out. You're also doing now a podcast as well, centered around the cards. And fill me in a little bit. I just heard you mention Mint 10. How does Mint 10, is that like the fractional ownership where you can buy part of a Mickey Mantle rookie, or is it?
Those things are going on, and we want to invest in certain companies in the space. So it's my goal to hit, again, if I hit one stock, like there's so much money from venture capital pouring into sports cards right now. There's going to be several companies that are extremely successful, the same way that StockX, GOAT, others were in sneaker culture. So we want to be at the forefront of that and taking bets and get another big win for that. So we're investing, small amounts in that, as well as, we look at cards as an alternative asset, and we're able to leverage kind of the technology, the tool, and the brains that, some of the best venture capitalists have in this space to identify new market trends that we see, undervalued assets, and hold on to these. Like cards are legitimately, if you take it back to 1986, and this is a great question, would you rather have an unopened one box of Fleer basketball cards that you could have got for a couple bucks, or, Microsoft stock? Most people would say Microsoft stock. You're talking 1986 to 2020. The Fleer cards have actually outperformed that. So it's just crazy when you look at how big the market is. And I still feel like we're in like the second, maybe third, rounding into the third inning right now. There still is not a ton of content. There's more stores opening up like us. Like there's another store called Bleecker Trading in New York that's really cool and cutting edge. Pull Wax in Miami. Like there's all these cool like cultural things happening. And we're trying to, really obviously own the audio sector of that. That's why we're so excited for the Sports Card Minute that we're doing with Benztown. Every day it's a 1 minute long segment that's breaking down everything from these new record sales, whereas, another card just sold for Giannis just sold for $3.2 million. We'll talk about that. And yes, we just launched the podcast called the Skee Sports Card Show. It's an hour-long show that we could potentially be bringing to radio too, that we're having some discussions with. We're just so excited about the content in that space. And if you want to learn more, listen to those. The first episode really gives a breakdown on the space, and then the others, we kind of really get into interviewing key figures and athletes and artists in it.
Are your parents still with us?
Yes, they still are.
Are they incredibly proud?
They are. They gush. So
that's fantastic, man. That's awesome that they've been able to see you have such amazing success.
Thank you. Also, look, it's a foundation that they've given me. So
any advice? I think it's so important that we get young people into our industry and into radio. Yes. And it's obviously been a very tough year and a lot of layoffs. And I think a lot of people feeling understandably probably down. What would be some of your advice to people that might be going through a rough patch right now?
Man, it's tough. But look, if you have to keep pushing through. You can't with COVID, right? It's affected everybody. It's not just you. It's affected so many people in so many industries. And we can't really, for us, look at how it affected us as a business. We built our entire 2020 plans, and we'd spent, like all construction, it went way over time and way over budget. We opened it in February, and our goal was monetizing the building. We had this place rented out. We were doing experiences. Our whole 2020 plan was based on experiences, on TV productions, on monetizing brands in these kind of experiential ways. We had to throw that to the wayside, but we quickly adjusted and adapted and have moved on, and have actually found, opportunities specifically on the Dash side. We're really leaning in on gaming and the metaverse. There's the biggest opportunity that I've seen in the music industry since the advent of internet happening right now. And not a lot of people see that. So we're really leaning in heavy in that space, but we probably wouldn't have seen or identified that if we were going on the original plan of this year. And it's tough. And it's not easy to do that. There's a lot of hardships, but you just have to keep pushing through. And what I've learned, some of the most successful people are the people that it's not necessarily if you're the smartest or the best, it's those that can be the most persistent and can persevere and last until the end. It's, if you last to the final round, it's easy to give up. If you don't quit, if you can somehow survive, that you're going to win just by virtue of still being there and still standing. And that's what kind of our goal is and what my career has always been about.
Such incredible advice. I was actually asked a very similar question earlier today for an interview, and I used persistence as a quality that is so badly needed. And Tony Robbins had said, a phenomenal quote, but that most people overestimate what they can accomplish in a year, but they underestimate what they can accomplish in 10.
100%.
And I can say, I think you're right around 10 years old at Dash. We're right around 10 years old at Benztown. And we're a fraction of what you've accomplished at Dash, but I never thought we would have accomplished what we did in 10 years. And to see what you've done is absolutely remarkable, man. And
Thank you, man. And sometimes you have to take a step back to realize that, right? Because it's so easy to get in those day-to-day grinds, but it's small wins here and there. And it's doing a lot of things. And a lot of stuff isn't going to work. It's going to be failures, but you have to learn from those failures, quickly adjust and adapt. And there's nobody that at the end of the day is there's not like a safety net. You just have to find a way to plow through and keep it moving. And at the end of the day too, what we do, it's just all these moments, we're going to look back on it and remember this, but it's going to be gone a couple years from now for most of us, and we'll all be in something new and hopefully have found something better and looking back like it's the best thing that ever happened, whether it's getting laid off, whether that's having to adjust or shut down even a business or do what that is. I really believe everything happens for a reason. You just have to keep pushing through and adapt.
I agree. We were born out of the Great Recession. I was laid off on President Obama's inauguration day and, one of several thousand people that day. And this, was largely came out of myself and Masa, who was also laid off from Premiere. And so while this is a horrific event, and it's really a black swan, horrible pandemic, but there will be good things that will come out of it and opportunities that will happen.
And that's the other thing too. It's a lot of it's your perspective. It's glass half full, glass half empty. Are things horrible? Absolutely. Especially right now, it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better, even though we see a vaccine on the timeline. But for me, the way that I operate, I always try to look at the positivity and focus on those things instead of dwelling on the negativity, because a lot of it's just a mindset. And even if I'm wrong on things, right? I'd rather live and be happier and have that perspective in there, because everything's just based on perspective, right? And I think it's just so important to keep that energy and positivity and belief.
Skee, I so greatly appreciate you taking the time to be on, and it's an honor. Congratulations. If you've not checked out Dash Radio, download the app. It's phenomenal. Also, check out, what is your Instagram account for Cards and Coffee?
We have Cards and Coffee and the Coffee Breakers. If you follow me just at DJ Skee, you'll be able to find all those things there. And thanks to you guys and the whole Benztown fam, and especially you, Chachi, for all the support. And you were one of the early believers and backers of Dash. You jumped in with us, so we thank for what you're doing. And we're so excited too, because now it's coming full circle. We're going back and putting things on terrestrial radio. We have new partnerships, we did a great one with La Campesina. We've done a lot of other things that we're talking about on the FM, AM terrestrial radio side and bringing back to it, because we don't look at necessarily Dash as just competition to radio. We look at it as an added element. We have a different audience. Terrestrial radio has a different audience. Let's figure out, especially in these times, how we can combine and work together more and take content and access that we have, distribution networks that they have, as well as great content that's being created on some of these stations and from some of these talent, and throw it through our network. We really believe in a win-win. We're platform agnostic, so I'm excited for what we're all going to do together. Is we're working, I'm probably letting the cat out of the bag a little early, but we're working on some special stuff together that'll roll out next year that I'm excited for the world to see.
Likewise, man. We really value the partnership, and we're excited to do more things with you in the future. And you are an inspiration, my friend.
You're the man.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. It means a lot to me, and congratulations on all your success.
Of course, brother. Thank you so much for having me, man. Anytime you need me, we're here.